I just want to say that John was such a tremendous influence on so many levels and such a role model for what leadership should be and what love should be, and how that kind of dedication and intelligence and heart can really do things to move mountains for individuals and for communities. And I just feel very blessed to have known him and felt his support on different levels, and I'm just sorry I hadn't seen him for a while, but I'm forever grateful for the kind of person he was and the leadership that he shared with so many. So thank you.
Start. Hi, Sage. It's Laura Waterman Woodstock, your Hill Fellow. And John is the first of our Hill Fellows to die. And I wish him well. I wish you well. And I embrace all of the family and hope to see you soon.
That was a wonderful send-off for a wonderful man. And I'm grateful that my family was able to enjoy our relationship with the Coles family. Helen Silla, thank you.
Sure, come here with me. Come here with me. Hi, I'm Jane Van Herky, Tawny, Jim Van Herky's daughter, and I brought wonderful Helen here today so that she could enjoy this beautiful service, and it was just outstanding. And I think the most wonderful thing I loved was the standing ovation at the end.
My family was all out of town. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jane, Tawny, Van Herky.
Van Herky.
Van Herky, Tawny.
Just start talking. Barbara Flanagan Sanford, my darling husband Earl. And we are old friends of John's and Sage's, and it was just a spectacular show. I loved it. Thank you.
Ditto.
I'm Marilyn Hogemeyer, and I worked one of many for John at the old Minneapolis Tribune. And when I was editor of Picture Magazine, we never had a contents page, and I asked, why couldn't we have a contents page to list out what was following in the magazine? Well, finally word came down that John Coles Jr. suggested, why couldn't we have a contents page? And 2 weeks later, those advertising guys got me a space for a contents page. So he had lots of power that he really didn't know he did in the newsroom for the tiniest little details, and I've always been grateful.
That's it. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I'm Peg Meyer, and thanks to the Coles family, I had a job at the newspaper for 35 years. I had a lot of fun. Thanks, John.
Short. I'm Karen Winiger. I worked at the Star Tribune for 20 years, from 78 to 98. And John scared me to death because he was so elegant and so smart. And then as I got to know him, I knew he was also warm and funny and deep and compassionate. And one of the many things he said to me, I think it was on a family occasion, because he was the aerobics instructor at the sweatshop where my sisters owned with him. Actually, he said so many good things. One of them was, the secret to marriage is working at it every day, he said, and I do. And this was when he was, 65 or 70. And I noted that he also impressed me by getting a tattoo of Sage's name on his arm in his 60s. That was something to admire. He also told me once that he recognized that I was being punished at the Tribune because I had to write something incredibly frivolous for several years. And it meant a lot to me that he recognized that he knew I was better than that. And I miss him terribly. He was a hell of a man. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jerry Ingber, and I, too, loved John. I was an immigration lawyer for many years, and John was always curious about just what it was that an immigration lawyer did, until he started referring me immigration clients, for which I am ever so thankful because of the people that I met through John and Sage. He will surely be missed.
I'm Judith Bryn Ingber. John knew me as Judy when I was young, and when Jerome and I first married, we invited John and Sage to come to our backyard for a barbecue and a dinner. It was a little awkward to have such people with finery upstairs to our very, very modest apartment, I thought. But after a few seconds, that thought vanished, and we had a marvelous time. We always had a marvelous time whenever we were together. And for some reason, very beautiful and mysterious piece of art that they had. Maybe it was first at Flash, over the stairs where the actors in search of a play, maybe that's what it was, that's what it always seemed to me, were waiting on this mirror, and there would John be standing at the stairs as if he was part of that painting, waiting to see who would come up and what great adventures would unfold. And I, too, was very grateful to have John as a friend and to feel that he was mine, too. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm R.T. Ryback, and I would say that John has been a hero at every stage of my life. As I was a young journalist of the Star Tribune, I remember him coming back into the newsroom and what that meant to us, and it was a huge thing to have this amazing, solid presence there. When I went out into the civic world of the Downtown Council, he was somebody I talked to and listened to about how to really move a civic community. When I became mayor, I talked to him about big things, and I think at every stage I just thought, I'll never be that good, but I'm sure glad I have somebody like that to look up to. And I could say I miss him, but I don't think he's really gone. He left us a lot. Thank you, John, and thanks to all of you who shared him with us.
Hello, I'm Herman Milligan, and I just wanted to send my deepest respects to the Coles family. And as you know, I've known John and Sage for a while, and just to thank them all for keeping the landscape of of human beings and all the contributions for what they've done have been really great. And I really think that the Coles family will continue that great tradition that John, has left with us. So thank you very much.
Hi, this is Mary Lee Hardenberg, and I think some of you have heard this story before, but one of my favorite stories about John was when Julie Anderson and I were fundraising for the One River, Mississippi. And he gave me some tips about how to ask other people for money after we had come to ask him for money. And he said, tell them how much you want to give them and then look them in the eye and say, and I know you're good for it.
Okay. Am I on? Tell me when to go. Okay. The first time, I'm a retired reporter from the Star Tribune named Bob Lundegaard. And the first time I met John was shortly after I started working for the paper in 1960. We were invited by some friends to an island up in the St. Joseph Channel that separates Canada from the United States above the Sault Ste. Marie. And it turned out that when we arrived at the dock to take a boat out to our island, there was another Minnesota license plate there. So later in the week, we were island hopping, and we stopped off at the home of some friends of the people who were our hosts. And as I walked in, I was startled to discover that among the guests there were Sage and John Coles. And we were introduced around, and Sage, to my great surprise, because I was totally unknown, said, "Are you the Bob Lundegaard that works for the Star Tribune?" And I said, "Yes." And my wife said, "Oh, you're the people from Minneapolis." And I kind of nudged her and I said, "Darling, this is John Coles Jr. of the Star Tribune." And she says, "Oh, you work for the paper too."
I'm Gary Gilson. I was a rookie reporter for the Minneapolis Star from 1961 to 62, and then I guess I was a veteran for the next 2 years before I left for New York and went into television. I had such great admiration for John, and I was very lucky to work for the paper while his father was still alive. And John had the same commitment as his father did to great journalism. And many years later, when I moved back to Minneapolis after 17 years away, I eventually wound up being the executive director of the Minnesota News Council. And it was my responsibility to raise money for the organization. John really believed in the Minnesota News Council, which made him almost unique among newspaper publishers, because the news business traditionally had stonewalled the public, which was demanding accountability from the news media, the same way the news media demanded accountability from all the institutions that they cover. But John really believed that a newspaper, to be great, had to make itself accountable to the public. So he supported the Minnesota News Council. And one day I called him up, and we had just formed a small endowment fund. We needed an endowment fund. And I called him, and he said, "Well, let's meet." And I said, "Well, would you consider helping us to grow this endowment fund?" And he said, "Well, how much money do you want?" And I said, "Well, how about $1 million?" I had read that he and Sage had just endowed the East Lake Street YWCA for $1 million, and I figured, why not ask? And he looked at me and he said, "Gary, $1 million is a lot of money." And I said, "I know." Well, I waited, and I, of course, never expected him to do that. But within a few days, I got a check for $150,000, which virtually doubled the size of our endowment fund. But it was his commitment to what we were working for that really counted so much, and the money was very important to us as well. But I remember having a wonderful time with John and some of our old newsroom colleagues a few years ago in some restaurant over in the North Loop, and just talking about the old days with a warmth that was just marvelous. And every time I saw John, I saw that glint in his eye and that warmth, and I'll never forget him. So it's wonderful to be able to celebrate him.
Hi, Sage. It's Sandra. What to say about John? Best thing to say about John is how much he loved you. I'll never forget ever walking up behind the two of you, walking up Selby, and watching you hold hands. It was just, I still touch my heart to think about it. I loved working with John. I loved teaching aerobics with him. I guess I just loved John like I love you. So, goodbye.
Is that a go finger? Okay. Hey, Sage and family. What a great service. And from the Winnegers, collectively. Terrific job. And we're so glad that all the rest of you are left on the planet to keep everything shipshape and running right in John's great tradition. And many, many wonderful stories yet to be shared about John and the Dayglow, pink Dayglow bike tights, spandex socks around his ankle, great aerobics instructor. But I will say that being able to come for Zosha and Jill and I to come and say goodbye was one of the most spectacular evenings of our lives.
Certainly of mine.
Certainly of Zosha's little life, soon to be big life. And since that, I drank my first martini with John as we said goodbye. I now will always think of John and have drunk a few more since then. And here's to John's big life. We're going to go get a martini. Love you.
Hi there, my name is Frank Sontag, and it was my distinct pleasure to be the executive director of the Cole Center for Dance and the Performing Arts when it opened. And I want to share with you one of my favorite memories of the entire opening weekend, which was glorious, by the way. It happened Friday afternoon at about 3 o'clock. I left the office, and in the hallway of the Hennepin building, I ran into Rocco Landesman, who is the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. Lucky me, I got to take him on a quick tour of the facility before the grand opening gala that night at 8 o'clock. He and his staff, we went all around, I showed them the whole thing, and as we were heading out the front door so that they could go on to their next appointment, as luck would have it, John Coles was coming in. So I got to introduce John Coles to Rocco Landesman, and which I found very gratifying. 4 hours later, we're at the Graves Hotel, and it's what they call the step and repeat. The flashes are going off, and I'm standing next to John Coles, and he bends down, and in my ear he says, Frank, I had no idea who you were introducing me to today. And then I remembered he didn't hear out of one ear. And I looked him in the eye and I said, John Coles, that is one of the things I admire and love most about you, is that you have a way of making everyone feel important. I said, that guy had no idea you didn't know who he was. And it's true. It's true. That was a happy moment for me. Yeah, John, there are few men worthy of being lionized, and John was one of them. It's 90 degrees outside today, and here I am in a suit, and to do that for John Coles, not a problem. God bless him. He was gracious, he was kind, he was smart as a whip, and it was an intoxicating combination. And I thank the Lord that I got to know him before the end. And Sage too. Thank you.
Hey, am I being filmed? Okay. My name is Jocelyn Fansler, and I just want to say to all the Coles family that I love you, and that you've given a most precious gift to all that know you, because you celebrate the individual and you give us complete footing to become who we need to be and who we long to be in life. Your hearts help others set themselves free. Thank you.
3, 2, 1. Hi, Sage and the family. I'm Chris Dahl. I just want to recall that special moment I had at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and I wrote this dream down I had of John, where John appeared, and he had that twinkle in his eye, and he said, it just looked like me, and just kind of, now I know, and kind of gave me a wink, and just turned around into the blue sky. And I've never had that ever happen to me in my life, but it was a emotional feeling when I found out the next day he passed away. And I wrote it down on a card, and my wife was there, and I told her about it the next morning, and then I found out that John passed away, and she was just amazed, like, I can't believe that happened. But I'm glad I knew John. My son's name is John, and it's changed to John because of John. And I want to let you know that just for, I don't know what purposes, but I'm glad to have known John. Thank you very much.
Sage and family. It's Sheila, of course. I had the great honor of working with John for these 50 years. And there's no one I admired more than him, and his love for you and his love for the whole community. And he was just so special. As you know, I give most of the history talks about the Guthrie. And I want you to know that I will always tell the story of John Coles. But I don't think there's speeches long enough or books long enough to really explain all that he was. Love you all. Bye.
Philip Burnett for Nellie Burnett. We're very sorry for your loss. John is truly a true example of how to live a full life. we thank all of you, and God bless you.
Okay, Coles family, I know you know who I am, but I'm going to say my name's Colin Knutson. I'm one of 3 Knutson boys, one of Paige's brothers, and the Knutson family is really pleased that we're here in force. We love John Coles Sr., we love the Coles family, and this is one of the best services that I have ever attended in my life, so hats off to everyone.
And very well deserved. John was a great, wonderful man. I haven't seen him, well, actually we saw him not too long ago at the event for Paige, and he couldn't have been more gracious and caring and outgoing, and it was great to see him. And so just our love from Claudia and myself. We love you all, Sage and the rest, Jay, all of you. God bless.
Okay, see you later. Thank you very much.
Hi, Sage and family. We are so much in love with your family, and it's been such a wonderful journey with you, an adventure of all these years. And we have such memories, Sage, of sitting around the table or standing around the table, putting things together with you and John and Michael and you, Sage, doing the just hands-on.
Looking at the pictures.
Yep, seeing how it should go together, and John and I looking at the directions.
Yes.
What a team we've been all these years. Anyway, love you all.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, I'm honored to read this tribute to John Coles Jr. from the Minnesota House of Representatives. And as a state legislator there, I was really happy to help put this together. So I'll just read it, and it speaks for itself, I think. So it says, the Minnesota Legislature, a House resolution honoring the life of John Coles Jr. Whereas the legacy of John Coles Jr. began with his position as editor of the Minneapolis Morning Tribune and Evening Star, where his thoughtful editorial voice and activist spirit developed those publications' philosophy and reputation through promotion of civil rights and liberal causes. And whereas, as publisher and chairman of the Star and Tribune newspapers, John Coles Jr. maintained a sense of responsibility toward the Twin Cities community, matched only by his dedication to his family and their publishing business. And whereas his vast philanthropy and eloquent advocacy have made an impact on our community that resonates today, most notably through the Guthrie Theater, the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome, the Cowles Center for Dance, which his wife and lifelong partner, Sage, helped to envision. And whereas the breadth of John Coles Jr. Philanthropic interests also encompass the Walker Arts Center, the Minnesota Orchestra, and the reversal of urban blight. I know about that. And whereas John Coles Jr. enabled his family to make a unique connection between urban, inner-city living and an appreciation of rural life and art. And whereas John Coles Jr. leaves behind a legacy integral to our understanding and appreciation of contemporary Minnesota, and the courage, character, wisdom, and love that his family knows as so well survive through the art, architecture, and ethics of our Twin Cities. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration of the Minnesota House of Representatives that it honors the exemplary and generous life of John Coles Jr. And this is signed on May 18th, 2012 by Kurt Zeller, the Speaker of the Minnesota House, Matt Dean, the Chair of Rules and Legislative Administration, and Karen Clark, myself, State Representative. It's an honor to present this to the family. Thank you. You want to see it?
My name is Cordelia Pearson, and I'm here representing my dad, Dick Pearson. He remembers John well from their days at Exeter together, and he couldn't be here today to honor John's family by celebrating his life. But when my husband and I moved here to the Twin Cities about 20 years ago, my dad said, "You've got to look up John Coles." And when we got here and learned a little bit more about the Coles family, I said, "Dad, that's like calling the mayor. I can't do that." And when my dad and stepmom came to visit, John and Sage welcomed us and our kids into their home. And we realized that, yeah, maybe we could have called them when we moved to the Twin Cities, and we would have been welcomed with open arms. I had the pleasure of getting to know Jay and Paige through my work at the Trust for Public Land, and was so impressed with their generosity and spirit, their commitment to making the world a better place. And when I met John and Sage, I realized where that intensity and generosity came from the depths of their heart, but also from John and Sage and the values that they brought out in people. So it's an honor to be here today. I feel that my life is richer knowing people like John, Sage, Jay, and Paige, and the family. And thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts.
My name is Craig Benson. I met John on a couple of occasions, but I heard about John before I ever knew him, and it wasn't even by name. I was in a seminar that was being broadcast via satellite all over the United States, and the presenter was a man named Werner Erhard, the founder of the EST training and the EST organization and Werner Erhard and Associates. And he said, I want to distinguish power from force for you. He said, power is the opposite of force. People who don't have power need to be forceful. And he said, to give you an example of what I mean by power, I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine who's a newspaperman in Minneapolis. And I had flown in to meet him one day. We were driving in a car afterwards to an event that he wanted me to attend. And at the time, they were trying to put a stadium into downtown Minneapolis. And I said, well, are you for or against it? He said, I'm for it. I said, why? He said, well, and he gave me about 100 reasons why there should be a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And when he was done, I was convinced. He said that there absolutely should be a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. There's no reason why there shouldn't be a downtown stadium. And he said, no, wait a minute. John did. And he said, Werner, here's why there shouldn't be a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And he gave him just as many reasons why there shouldn't be a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And Werner was convinced. He said, you're right, there should never be a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And that was Werner's way of demonstrating what the essence of power is. It isn't about having the right opinion or having the more reasons for something to happen. It's about choosing. And John had chosen to be for there being a stadium in downtown Minneapolis. And I want to thank you for being the kind of family that would support a man like John in being that powerful, and for being an example for the rest of us, so that it's not about dominating others. It's not about pressuring people into agreeing with you. It's about understanding all sides of an issue and choosing. Thank you very much for this event and this opportunity to share with all of you. I appreciate it.